Today's topic is Aatmnirbhar Bharat and agriculture. I am very glad that Prasannaji has chosen the word Aatmnirbhar Bharat because in no other sector, perhaps this becomes relevant and pertinent for the nation to realize what it means not to be Aatmanirbhar. Those of us who belong to that era, what happened in the 50s and the 60s when production was so low that we couldn't even feed our people. And we had to import grain from outside, the famous PL 480 grain. And India used to produce just about 50 million ton when we gained independence. And as you know, today we are way, way beyond that. I think I don't have the exact figures, but it is about 300 million tons all told. So that has been the progress. And from a dependent nation, dependent on the requirement of food, which is a basic requirement for any country, we have become today Aatmanirbhar. And many people at that time also resisted the reforms that our initial prime ministers were bringing in. In fact, if you ask me, the first reform measure in the agriculture field was basically around the beginning of 60s when we were struggling against providing food to each and every individual citizen, each and individual citizen. And we all know of the famous call by the Prime Minister of India, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. And that call was, we were practically on our knees on two fronts. One was food, the other was national security. The Chinese had ingressed into our country and we were not prepared materially or otherwise to properly defend our country. So Lal Bahadur Shastri, a very visionary prime minister that we have had, identified very correctly the two essential Atmanirbhartas that you need. One is food, the other is defense. And therefore he gave that call, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. And we had the first reform in the agriculture sector in the form of getting science into agriculture. Before that, our farmers were basically not provided access to scientific development in the field of agriculture. Though Indian Council of Agriculture Research and many of its labs had been up initially, but the breakthrough in food production came only with that first reform of getting science into agriculture through a very famous gentleman and scientist, Mr. Borlaug, and the ICR scientists worked together, and we had the Green Revolution slowly. So that was the first reform. Imagine what would have happened if that reform had not taken place. So reform has a very crucial place in any sector, any field, development of. Now, having said that, and let me tell you, I have seen through agriculture files, old files, and talked to old friends in the sector who had been there then. There was a large number of people who said, we don't need this gentleman called Norman Borlaug. We can do it ourselves. We don't need this revolution. We will manage to produce seeds as good as anybody. So there is always a resistance. We need not get unnecessarily perturbed by the resistance that we are seeing now. any change, there would be xenophobic, reactions to that. Anything new happens, people do feel uncertain, do feel shaky. That happens in personal life, that happens in national life. So there's nothing to be demoralized or get concerned that why are so many people protesting against this reform. The other important issue that I would like to bring to your notice is that the second great reform happened in 1991, as we all know, as civil servants. Many of us were working at that time. And we know the pre-1991 and post-1991 scenario very well. We have been in the field at that time, many of us in industry, many of us in finance, and we know how crucial that reform was. And that reform was not through any particular enactment or big hue and cry about that reform, but mark that 1960s reform of Green Revolution and 1991 reform of this doing away with the license Raj, both happened when we faced a crisis. I'm not going to go into the 1991 crisis, well known. Students who are here may like to look up why that happened. So, but as you can, even then, even in 1991, we all remember that everybody said that this is a doomsday reform because all our industries will close down, foreigners will come in, this would happen, that would happen. So nothing happened. In fact, we did very well due to the 1991 reforms. Now, I have personal experience of the 2004 disinvestment program. Now, that was another big reform measure by the then government, because for the first time, they were trying to get out of industry. Government was trying to get out of running routine industries like bread making, sari making, scooter making, and all kinds of things which anybody nowadays, no government manufactures those things. And those 4 years that I spent, and mind you, there was no legislation in that. It was just executive instructions that followed. And the matter went up right to the Supreme Court, challenging the reforms, not once, several times. First, it was challenged in Balco. The Supreme Court said, there's nothing wrong, go ahead. Then ultimately, during the HPCL, BPCL disinvestment, the court said, no, you have to first go to Parliament and all those things. So there are challenges in court, there are challenges on the street, there are political debates, there's debate in the Parliament. This is the process of democracy, and any good step is bound to create some kind of debate and discussion in a system. Now, let us come to this particular agriculture reform business that we are seeing today. What is it? Now, we all know that if you take a snapshot of India around, say, 1970s, 80s, and a snapshot of India today, you will see that we have done very well in certain sectors, exceedingly well in telecom, exceedingly well in space technology, exceedingly well in atomic energy technology, exceeding well in biotechnology. All those things we have done exceedingly well. And for the last 10 years or so, at least the last phase of my service, I saw a tremendous amount of development in rural areas. That never used to happen when we joined the service. And so you see changes everywhere. We have also seen changes in agriculture. It's not that agriculture has not seen change or reforms or better application of science, technology, into the field of agriculture or even business practices. I'm aware that the various companies, big companies, have done very good work in the field of agriculture. And also, governments have introduced several programs which have benefited the field of agriculture. But time and again, the experts in the field of agriculture, the economists, the agriculture economists, the political leadership, then the farming community, the scientific community, time and again, they have come up against the barrier that do what you may, the agriculture growth rate doesn't cross 4% to 3%. Do what you, the, the productivity of various crops not crossing a certain level. Third, there is constant wastage of food, and the marketing of agriculture products is very, very outdated. Very, very outdated. And which is not true in other sectors. You have also to look at the fact that agriculture employs almost half the population and contributes just 15% to the GDP. Now, you don't have to look at any other figure. Just by this figure, you know that something is wrong. You don't have to be an agriculture expert or a brilliant economist to realize that a sector where half the population is the workforce produces only 15%. It cannot be the most efficient part of the economy. And therefore, people try to identify, okay, let us take a look. Where exactly are we losing the efficiency in the agriculture sector? And several governments, we have MS Swaminathan, who is a very experienced, too young a participant, I guess. So, okay, can we control that?
Yeah, yes, sir. Please continue. I'm going to mute them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, the question is that if you analyze it impartially and theoretically, you will see the exact points where agriculture is holding up the growth rate in the agriculture sector. Now, one of that is investment. Investment doesn't come. The amount of investment that goes into the other sectors of the economy, hardly anything goes to agriculture. The capital output ratio, again, is very adverse. So if you put X amount of money, whereas you will get Y in the industry, you will get only Y by 2 or Y by 3 in agriculture sector. And so how do you get investment? Unless you get investment, you really cannot make a sector grow. Every sector has grown when there has been investment. And how do you get investment? You can get the government can invest or the private sector can invest. Now, agriculture as such is 100% private sector enterprise. The farmers are private sector people. There's no government doing agriculture anywhere. So how do you get private sector investment? Can the farmers put in that money? Certainly not. So where will you get that money? There has to be some big people, not very giant people, but some people who would be interested in investing money in this agriculture sector. Fine. But anybody with money, including ourselves, we will not invest unless we are certain of certain things. First of all, we have to be certain that the rules of the game will not change overnight. Suppose I make a contract with some group of farmers and suddenly tomorrow you say the government comes out with a notification saying, no, you can't take this much of product from these farmers. There is some crisis and we won't allow you to take. Now, the machinery which I bought, investing money to process those things, they'll lie idle. So my banker will ask for money, I won't be able to pay back. It's as simple as that, anywhere, any sector. So therefore, invest. If you want, first of all, you need investment. Secondly, if you need investment, you must first of all provide a atmosphere where the investor knows that the rules of the game are not going to be changing every day, are not going to be arbitrary, are not going to be unfair. You can make rules which will be totally unfair. Sometimes we have done that in the tertiary sector. I'm certain everybody knows we made rules which just didn't work. So, uh, so and lastly, agriculture, unfortunately, is a produce which you cannot store. It's not like a mobile phone or something. I mean, maybe paddy and wheat you can store for some time, maybe pulses you can store, but hundreds of things you can't store for a long time. There are A, costs of storing, and B, there's the cost because of deterioration. So therefore, all these things you have to take care of. And one of the ways of taking care of is to ensure that the flow of agricultural produce from the producer to the ultimate point where it is going to be converted or it is going to be consumed is as smooth as anything else. You have seen, if you ask, for instance, Unilever, that you can sell your soaps only in the Bombay market or the Delhi market, then how is it going to gain profit? Because you have curtailed its marketing, right? Take, for example, in the agriculture sector itself, you take the example of milk or horticulture produce. Incidentally, horticulture is one area where India has made tremendous jumps. Also milk, eggs, so many things. So if you allow free, fair movement of produce, agriculture produce, milk or fruits and vegetables, you see that it can work smoothly. Nobody exploits nobody. And farmers gain and the country gains, the economy gains. One of the largest producers of milk today, I believe the largest producer is India. So it is not that in the agriculture sector also people are waiting to exploit the poor farmer and run away with the money. In fact, so now question arises that there's only one area in the agriculture sector, that is food grains and some other crops, where the question of marketing and fair and proper system of marketing is not present. And this is not my personal opinion. In 2003, the government has started, the then government started analyzing this, and reports after reports have been formed. In fact, ultimately, when I was there in the ministry, I remember that we had constituted, the government had constituted 3 committees. And one committee, they were committees comprising of chief ministers as members, nobody less than that, because that showed how important the issues of agriculture reforms were and the commitment of the then government. So one committee, I was the member secretary, so I remember it was the northern states and Haryana, Punjab, UP, and Mr. Huda, the then chief minister, was the chairman. We had meetings in Chandigarh, several of them, and each and every issue in the agriculture sector, not only marketing, but if every issue was discussed threadbare and suggestions received from the states. And thereafter, we submitted a report signed by Mr. Huda to the government. Similarly, Mr. Narendra Modi, the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, now the Honorable Prime Minister, he headed the committee comprising of some southern states, Maharashtra, Gujarat, and few other states. And my friend Rakesh Kakkar was the member secretary of that committee. And thoroughly, again, in his committee, they discussed each and every issue, marketing especially, because that was the weak Achilles heel in agriculture. And they also made recommendations. And the third committee, I think it was headed by Mr. Nitish Kumar or Mr. Patnaik from CM of Odisha. One of them, I don't recall exactly. All these three reports were presented to the Prime Minister, and the government regularly monitored implementation. And therefore, it is not that it's some knee-jerk reaction that suddenly the government has got up and passed three bills. Now, when I say these committees examined each and every aspect of agriculture. But even before that, the Minister of Agriculture had set up a committee of agriculture ministers of states. And one of the joint secretaries from the ministry, who is now Chief Secretary of UP, he became the member secretary. And they discussed only agriculture marketing and APMC and things like that. In fact, way back, I think even before all this, a model act, marketing act was circulated to the states asking them to adopt it, or at least adopt the basic concept in it. And then this committee also recommended. It was not easy to get all the state ministers to agree to one particular thing, but I must say that all of them agreed, and there was a unanimous decision to go for these marketing reforms. Now, what is these reforms? Basically, as I told you, when an investor comes, he needs certainty of his investment. If I have to invest money, I must know that down the line, things don't change. The rules, regulations, stock limits, all these things just suddenly change. And because in business, there are certain investments made, there are returns to be there. So the government looked at it very carefully. I must say, I've gone through all the three bills and also read the preamble to the bills. I mean, the detailed notes that went before the bill. Most of civil servants here would know that before a bill is presented, that there's a lot of discussion and thrashing out, and then the detailed note is prepared, giving the concept and the fundamental principles behind that bill. So if you look at that, what does it do? As I said, all these stock limit business, that is properly addressed in the amendment in the EC Act. So this arbitrary change by the government, today you can export, tomorrow you can't export, you should hold stock limit, you cannot hold stock limit, all these things will no longer be arbitrary, right? And therefore, this is one bill. The other bill is that which is the most understood bill, the marketing mandis and all other things. If you read the bill, it will be clear. In fact, I would compliment the people who have designed the bill, because it is an enabling bill. It doesn't say that tomorrow all APMCs are closed, now please move into whatever system. No, it gives an option to the farmer where he can sell his grain. No mandi can APMC mandi can now say, no, if you don't sell here, you're violating XYZ law, and therefore you will be punished or you will be fined. So I think this is the best thing to do. Keep 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 both routes open and leave it to the farmer that what he wants to choose. And I am certain that over the years, the system will naturally move to the more efficient system if you leave it free, without control, without intervention, right? Government has also realized that if you leave it to investors and farmers, then it is not a level playing field. Here are smart guys from IIMs and engineering colleges dealing with some of them illiterate or semi-literate or just about literate or very low qualification farmers. So therefore, what they did is, if you want to have a sale purchase agreement, then you must play by certain rules of the game. That is the third bill. So one is not to make this EC Act applicable arbitrarily, except for extreme emergencies, which of course nobody will object to. Second, the farmer is only enabled to sell his produce outside the so-called APMC. And third, that if you want to enter into an agreement, then sorry, you have to follow these basic things. You can't exploit the farmer. I don't understand personally what better law government could have passed. But then I'm not a farmer, so I'm sure some farmers would be having genuine doubts. I'm not saying that that we should not discuss with them. Certainly, government is in fact discussing with them. So this is the gist of it. Now, why is there an agitation? Why are people sitting in this cold and uh, facing the threat of this COVID with thousands and hundreds sitting on dharna? Because somewhere, I think the farming community is doubting whether it will actually help them or this new system is going to put them into trouble. They have somehow, some of them, not all, some of them have somehow felt, and mostly people from farmers from Punjab and Haryana, that maybe MSP will be done away with, or maybe there'll be these huge private sector giants swooping down on us and taking away our land. So these are apprehensions which are genuine. If I were a farmer, I would have also had similar apprehensions. But it is the job of the farm leaders and the state machinery, people, I mean, the civil service should also be involved to explaining to them, look, this is what we are doing. It is for your own good. See, that is going on in the other sector of milk and meat and horticulture, everything, and no calamity has suddenly landed on their head. In fact, they have prospered. So please sit down and understand what is the real purpose of this bill that we have passed. But unfortunately, that stage we have not reached. I'm sure that at one point of time, there will be some serious dialogue and the farmers will see that it is not really against their interest. Rather, it is in the long-term interest of the farmers